Gun violence. It's a national topic on everyone's mind.
It's hard to imagine any American who wasn't affected by the tragic shooting in Newtown, Connecticut at Sandy Hook Elementary last December. And that's just the most recent incident on a long list of events that includes Columbine, Virginia Tech, and Aurora.
We've even seen the threat of gun violence here on our own campus. Campus security says 18-year-old Alexis Gray came to ELN with a rifle, ammunition, and other weapons back in November. Gray was charged with felony possession of a weapon on a college campus.
But when it comes to gun violence, the answer to how we deal with such an issue is unclear, undefinable even. On one side, you have those claiming that the solution lies in stricter gun control. They claim that the increasing number of homicides could be halted or lowered by increasing control, requiring stricter background checks, limiting gun ownership, even potentially limiting gun ownership to law enforcement officials. To them, the answer to gun violence is to get rid of the guns completely.
But those on the other side of the debate don't think the answer lies in restrictions. They state that the Second Amendment guarantees a person's right to own a gun, that restricting guns is unconstitutional, and that if you remove guns from the hands of citizens, the only people still holding them are criminals.
And that's what brings us here today. Welcome to the special broadcast of ELN's Gun Violence Panel in McKinnon Hall, presented by ELN Local News. I'm Katie Merrigy.
And I'm Julie Morris. Thank you for tuning in to Channel 5. And for those of you listening on WSOE 89.3, we thank you for listening. Today we'll be taking a closer look at gun laws and issues in North Carolina and around the country.
The panel begins at 6:30 and we'll bring that to you live. But in the meantime, there have been a lot of gun-related events that have made local and national news over the past 12 months.
Last July, a mass shooting in Aurora, Colorado during a midnight screening of The Dark Knight Rises. Police say a shooter threw tear gas into the crowd and began shooting. He killed 12 people, including a 6-year-old girl, and injured 58 others.
A couple weeks later, there was a shooting at a Sikh temple in Wisconsin. The massacre left 6 people dead and 4 others wounded. Fast forward a couple months to December, there was a deadly attack at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. The gunman, Adam Lanza, entered the school and killed 20 children and 6 adult staff members before killing himself, making it the second deadliest mass shooting in American history since the Virginia Tech massacre.
We're going to change some gears now. Let's look at North Carolina. When asked if NC residents personally own a gun, 57% of North Carolinians said no, while 42% said they do. The ELN poll recently found that 90% of North Carolina voters support background checks on all gun sales.
North Carolina currently requires owners have a permit for a handgun. According to public policy polling, 67% agree with this law, while 20% disagree.
And finally, the Brady campaign to prevent gun violence assigns a numerical score to states based on how restrictive the state's gun laws are, with 0 being the least restrictive and 100 being the most restrictive. North Carolina received a score of 12.
North Carolina Governor Pat McCrory has been vocal on the issue of gun control. He said that he's against additional regulations, saying that he would rather focus on the laws that are already in place and that North Carolina doesn't need more gun legislation.
In January, while guest on a local radio show, McCrory went as far to say that extra gun control legislation is foolish. The North Carolina Democratic Party spokesman Clay Pittman responded, calling McCrory's statement foolish, saying that McCrory's dismissal was an insult to those affected by gun violence and their families.
Now that you have a little background on the issue, our Brennan McGovern is live in McKinnon Hall, where the Gun Violence Forum is going to take place. Brennan, what are some of the arguments we can expect to hear tonight?
Thank you, Katie. Since Newtown, gun control advocates have focused their efforts on trying to enact a ban on military-style assault weapons. Now, the general consensus is that such a ban would not pass either house in Congress. However, even if assault weapons are not banned, some are looking to try to limit the size of their magazines. For example, in Newtown, Adam Lanza used an AR-15 equipped with a 30-round magazine. In Aurora, Colorado, James Holmes used an M16 equipped with a 100-round magazine, and advocates want to limit the legal size of magazines to 10 rounds. When Jared Lochner, the shooter in Tucson, Arizona, had stopped to reload after shooting Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords and 18 others, he was tackled to the ground by bystanders, ending his murderous assault. So, NRA and other opponents of gun control, however, have said that enlisting such a ban goes against the Second Amendment and would harm law-abiding citizens who may need more than 10 rounds at a time to defend themselves should they be under attack. These are some of the arguments that I expect to hear later tonight. I'll be back here afterwards to recap the debate. Back to you guys at the desk.
Thanks, Brennan. A bill being considered in the North Carolina House is getting quite the response from the University of North Carolina. The proposed House Bill 937 would allow handguns on college campuses as long as they remain in a car. UNC President Tom Ross says the new legislation would increase the risk to public safety and hurt the ability to protect the campus. He also said that vehicle break-ins could put these guns into the wrong hands.
Discussions on gun safety proposals were accepted by the Senate in early April. At that time, a bill requiring more intensive background checks and harsher penalties for straw purchasing of guns was voted on. The vote came out 68-31 in favor of the bill. Recently, the Senate failed to gather enough support for the bill to move forward.
Urban areas have seen their share of gun violence as well. In February, White House Chief of Staff to the Vice President, Bruce Reed, discussed the concern he had with guns getting into the hands of gang members in low-income urban areas. He worried that friends of gang members could obtain guns legally and then sell them or give them to their gang member friends or family members.
We're going to head back to McKinnon Hall now, where things are just minutes away from getting started. Our Eric Halpern is live with some student expectations of the event. Eric?
Thanks, Katie. I spoke to first-year student Deanna Stanton, who is on the student panel tonight. She expects that there's going to be an open and cooperative discussion surrounding some of the issues surrounding the debate. She does expect that there might be some tension in the room at times, but overall she expects a respectful atmosphere. She hopes that this will be an opportunity for students and others to share views and work towards some kind of change. Overall, she just hopes that everyone leaves with some more knowledge. Katie and Julie, back to you in the studio.
Thanks, Eric. Today's panel will include several expert panelists involved in the discussion. These experts are the Town of Elon Police Chief Cliff Parker, City of Burlington Councilman CeeLo Fawcett, North Carolina House Representative Stephen Ross, Elon Associate Professor of Law Michael Rich, and pounding out the panel is Emeritus Chaplain of Elon, Richard McBride.
Let's take a look at who the panelists are. First up is Town of Police Chief Cliff Parker. Parker worked for 29 years in law enforcement before being named police chief last year. Before joining Elon Town Police, Parker worked for the Burlington Police Department, and Parker has a special connection to Elon. He's a graduate.
The next expert speaking is the North Carolina House Representative Stephen Ross. Ross is no stranger to the political scene. He served as Burlington City Council member for more than 15 years and served as Burlington Mayor for 2 terms. In 2012, the Republican was given a 75% approval rating from the NRA, according to Project Vote Smart. Ross has spoken out publicly in favor of keeping gun permits confidential.
Our next expert is CeeLo Fawcett, a Burlington City Councilman since 2009. In 2008, this Republican received a B rating from the NRA, according to Project Vote Smart. Fawcett received an award from Governor Pat McCrory in March for outstanding volunteer service. This Burlington native worked for LabCorp for 36 years before retiring in 2005.
This next face is familiar to the Elon community. His name is Reverend Richard McBride. McBride is a university chaplain emeritus. He served as chaplain from 1984 to 2009, a 25-year stretch. During his time at Elon, McBride was also the director of church relations and assistant professor of religious studies.
And our final panelist is another familiar face to Elon. His name is Michael Rich, and he joins the discussion with the legal perspective. Rich is an associate professor of law at Elon's Law School. Before joining Elon Law, Rich was part of a law firm in Cincinnati.
And we have some experts of our own in the studio. We now go to our Jason Puckett to tell us some more about some of the topics you could hear about tonight at the gun violence panel. Jason?
Thanks, Julie and Katie. You know, the topic of gun violence is a very big topic with a lot of subtopics underneath it. So I took a glance at the statements that are going to be read tonight. And some of those topics tonight that they're going to discuss are mental health, new regulations compared to current regulations, bans on certain types of guns, video games and entertainment, and background checks. So I'm joined today by the SGA Senator of the Elon College of Arts and Sciences, John Crowden, and former SGA President Darian Flowers. Thank you both for being here with us today.
Thank you.
So let's start with you, John. You know, those topics that I just listed, is there one that you think is going to be a bigger topic that's going to have more discussion based on it?
Just gun regulation.
And what do you mean by gun regulation?
We hear a lot every day in the news about whether or not we should regulate what kinds of guns that should be sold, or whether we should do more background checks and expand them.
What's your take on that issue?
I'm not sure how I feel about banning certain types of guns, but I certainly feel like we should expand background checks to the internet more strongly so that we can make sure that people who should not have guns do not get the guns.
And Darian, what's your take on that?
No, I tend to disagree with John's position. I think the fact is that people who are going to commit crimes are going to, do those regardless of whether they had to file some paperwork before doing so. The fact is that people who are deranged, like the Newtown shooter and the Aurora shooter, are people that require serious mental health treatment and in some cases, commitment. And so I think that I would hope that we would hear more of a conversation about how do we, assess these people and make sure that they get the treatment that they receive, not only for themselves, but to also help the general public.
So would you say there needs to be more work done on mental health?
Of course. I mean, obviously anyone who's going to commit these kinds of acts of violence are mentally disturbed. And the fact is that in America, we have a cultural taboo towards discussing sicknesses of the brain. And so the fact is that we as a society need to have a general discussion about how do we address these issues and treat them so to make sure that we don't have similar situations like Sandy Hook and Aurora.
And John, how do you feel? Is mental health what's to blame here?
I'm very hesitant to blame mental health totally, because there are a lot of people with mental health issues who would never pick up a gun because mental health is not always the core issue. Yes, we do need to evaluate whether or not someone's mental health issues makes them incapable of getting a gun, but we just got to make sure that when we're evaluating, we're not stigmatizing people with mental health issues.
Now, one of the people who are going to get up and speak tonight, they do touch on mental health, and they kind of relate it to how they think that video games and some of the entertainment industry are having an impact on that. Would one of you want to take that first on your views on that kind of element of this?
Okay, I would like to take it.
Yeah, go.
I do not believe that playing a video game makes you more violent than someone who does not play a violent video game. In fact, I think that video games keeps people from being violent because they take out their aggression on the video game. And I think it's insulting to the intelligence of the people who play the video games to assume that they're going to go out and shoot somebody because they feel like real life is a game.
Darren?
Well, I would say that I agree with parts of what John is saying. The fact is that I also do not want to stigmatize people who indulge in these kind of simulations with the fact that they have a predisposition to violence. However, I also am a proponent of personal responsibility, when in the cases of minors, the responsibilities of parents to regulate within their own home about what they think the appropriate kind of experiences that children should be having. Additionally, the fact is that I am a fan of allowing private citizens, adults to patron whatever kind of brand or genre of video game that they have. But I think it also would be naive to realize that this kind of exposure or sensitivity to mass acts of violence that you see in some of these video games that would not lead to some kind of at least realization that maybe for people who don't have the developed minds that you and I share, that they might have an ability to act these out in real life.
Well, look, it's very clear that you both have different views on this, and I'm sure that's going to be reflected tonight in the panel. So is there anything you think on this that there can be a common ground found? Do you think in a forum like this there's going to be anything that people agree on? Darian?
Well, I think the first thing is that, John and I are politicians, so we understand the power of word usage and imagery. And the fact is that if you want to look at this university conversation that we're having, it's an important one to have, but look at the way that we're framing it with the language that we're using. Gun violence. Now, I guarantee there is not a person in this country who is going to come out and say, I'm a liberal, I'm a conservative, and I am in favor of gun violence. So, of course, we're going to have people that are saying that we're, anti-gun violence. And
how would you prefer to see that labeled?
I think that we should look at this conversation around gun regulation. How do we want to regulate guns? Because the fact is that, in the United States, we have in certain regions a tradition of guns that have been passed down from father to son and are a part of the cultural makeup of those regions. And so how do we have a conversation where we want to ensure public safety, but additionally make sure that we have individuals have the ability to express themselves and enjoy the recreational activities that they want to? So I think framing the issue around what kind and what level of regulation is more appropriate.
John, do you have a response to that?
I would agree with the majority of what he's saying.
That's a great thing, yeah.
We've got progress here.
Okay. Yes, the debate, I guess, in this case, is framed in an unfair way because it's gun violence. We should just be talking about guns and their role in society.
Okay.
And I feel like what we need to do, something that both sides could probably agree on, is expanded background checks, because I can't remember a time when anyone died from a background check.
All right, well, again, thank you both for being here on the panel with us. We're going to move on so we can get to the actual forum here in a couple minutes. And if you'd like to be part of the gun violence discussion yourself, please use the hashtag EUGunPanel on Twitter, and also make sure to follow Elon Local News for live updates during the panel. Back to you.
Thanks, Jason. Currently, federal law prohibits certain mentally ill people from buying firearms. According to the NRA, anyone who is deemed by a court as being a danger to themselves or others, unable to stand trial due to mental instability, or who has been involuntarily committed cannot legally buy a gun under federal law. But some groups are worried that too much focus is being put on stopping the mentally ill from buying guns and not enough on improving general mental health care.
The gun industry is playing a big part in the country's economy. According to the National Shooting Sports Foundation, the firearms and ammunition industry was responsible for almost $33 billion in economic activity in the United States in 2012. The industry also generates big tax revenue. The industry and its employees pay more than $2.1 billion in taxes. Though gun sales gun sales bring that money into the economy. I'm sorry about that. Not everyone is okay with the current gun laws. According to the Fox News poll from earlier this month, 82% of Americans are in favor of background checks before you can buy a gun. 49% believe that gun laws should be stricter, and 52% think that it is more important to create laws that reduce gun violence instead of protecting gun rights.
The most recent ELN poll found that most North Carolinians are in favor of tightening gun control laws. 93% of North Carolina residents support background checks for all individuals buying a firearm, and 83% support waiting periods from when guns are purchased to when they're physically given to the buyer before citizens can purchase handguns. That's not all. 55% are in favor of limiting the size of ammunition clips and bans on semi-automatic assault rifles.
All right, we're going to head over to McKinnon for the panel, but we will be back after the panel's over, so be sure to stick with ELN Local News on Channel 5. And if you're listening to us on the radio, ELN on WSOE at 89.3. But we're going to head first to Eric before the panel. He's going to bring us over there. All right, Eric?
Thanks, Julie. The debate is just about to start here. I spoke to first-year student Jensen Roll, who expects two well-argued sides, and looking forward to the questions. Julie, back to you. Jensen also expects that there's going to be lots of questions coming up after the debate, and he's looking forward to hearing what all the different students have to say. The debate's about to start here, so we're going to take you to that.
So it looks like they're not just ready yet for us, but that's okay. We've been doing a lot of our own research about gun control laws and what we're expecting to hear tonight. Katie, is there anything that you really think you're going to hear tonight from anyone speaking?
I think people...
Oh, hold on. Actually, the panel is ready.
Hold the
We'll come
phone.
back and we'll answer that question for you, so let's head over to McKinnon.
Scholar. I've had the pleasure of serving on the committee to plan this event. We've come together tonight to hear several perspectives through both our expert and community panelists. And the purpose of this event is to discuss many areas of this issue of violence related to the use of guns. Tonight I have the pleasure of introducing our moderator, Dr. Connie Ladeau-Book, Associate Provost of Academic Affairs and Professor of Communications. She has been teaching at ELN for nearly 15 years and has received countless honors and awards for her work within her chosen discipline of communications. Dr. Book is also co-chair of the Council on Civic Engagement. Elon University defines civic engagement as the process of learning about the assets, needs, and concerns of the larger communities of which we are a part, and the willingness to collaborate with others to help define and achieve the common good. We are pleased to have a moderator who represents these values so well. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Book.
Thank you, Tara. And thanks to everyone for being here tonight. And for those joining us electronically, we welcome you as well. We're really pleased to see so many Elon students and members of our local community, something that doesn't happen very often throughout the academic year, but particularly on this topic, which affects all of us. The seed for tonight's discussion began shortly after the events of Sandy Hook. when Emerson College President Lee Pelton, in a letter to President Obama, called on universities to pledge to do what we do best in our academic communities: engage thought leaders, faculty, students, staff, trustees, and friends in meaningful debate and dialogue, which in turn might lead to positive action. President Lambert signed that letter on behalf of Elon University, and that is why we are gathered here this evening. At Elon, we have a mission that embraces engaged learning as the engine of hope and prosperity for our democracy. That learning, like tonight's discussion, brings passion and personal conviction to the table. These ingredients can make for tough but transformative conversation. We've intentionally designed tonight's conversation on gun violence that engages first listening, then questioning, and respectful consideration of our differences. As remarks are being made, if you're prompted with a question, we've provided a card on your seat to write the question that you would like asked. We have people in the aisle, so just raise your card and they will collect your question. We will collect those, and they will be the basis of our interactive portion of the program tonight. I'd like to start tonight's conversation by saying we begin on common ground. The common ground is our wholesale rejection of violence. No one in this community is supportive of violence. And so from that common ground, we welcome each and every one of you and your ideas to the table tonight. So let's get started. Ben on the front row, Ben Rashton is also co-chairing the committee that designed our panel discussion tonight, and he'll be our timekeeper. So each of our panelists that were selected to present tonight have 3 minutes to make a personal statement. Following those personal statements, we'll turn to our panel of experts from our community to each give 3 to 5 minutes of remarks about their work and their thoughts in this area. So let's begin with student Samantha Allen.
Hello, my name is Samantha Allen. I'm a freshman here at Elon. I'm an Elon College Fellow, and I plan on majoring in anthropology and sociology. Today in this gun violence debate, I want to take the focus off of guns and onto mental health. I think that taking a gun away from a person won't make them any less violent, and we need to tap into where this violence is coming from. The first motivation I want to talk about is male anger and aggression, the need to express masculinity. In the last 30 years, there have been 62 mass shootings in the United States. Out of all the killers, only one was a woman. Our nation has associated guns with power and control with being a man. Another way to understand this motivation is to look into our mental state. Mental health is a major issue in our nation, and the thing is, it's a tricky subject because it's always evolving. Sometimes it's a combination of things. Many times an individual has a combination of illnesses that is causing the problem. Also, the definitions of different mental illnesses have changed over time, and an illness that was previously perceived as causing social anxiety or withdrawal is now associated with violent or aggressive behavior. What I do want to say is that mental illness does not cause violence, and the stigma and discrimination of those with mental illness is also a major issue in our nation. But the problem is, left untreated, those with mental illness are predisposed to violence. A person with mental illness is 3 times more likely to commit a minor to serious violent act than someone without. Early intervention is key, and mental health care needs to be just as important as other health care. The problem is, our nation doesn't want to talk about it. When we see someone bleeding or in need of help, we run to them, but if we see someone acting out of the ordinary, we turn our eye and hope it goes away. We need to address this issue head on. The nation needs to be educated on mental illnesses, and we need to implement policies that will stop future violent acts. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Bass, and I'm a freshman here at ELN. And as a passionate hunter and gun owner, I would like to offer my thoughts regarding gun violence. In recent weeks, gun and ammunition sales have skyrocketed in response to gun control legislation. In 2010, there were an estimated 300 million privately owned firearms in the US. Now, there are arguably more guns than there are people due to the recent surge in sales, which means that there is not a correlation between the number of guns and the number of murders. There is a presumption that strict gun regulation will reduce the number of gun-related deaths. But imposing gun regulation upon the law-abiding will not regulate the lawless. The U.S. Department of Justice prosecuted 44 out of 48,000 illegal gun purchases. Their annual report said, quote, "Funding constraints had hurt the effectiveness of operations," end of quote. Instead of imposing new gun regulations, why don't we allocate the U.S. Department of Justice the necessary resources to prosecute these criminals? Law enforcement at schools should not be a foreign concept to any of you. At my boarding school, there is a police officer who is in charge of campus security. Similarly, ELN has campus security as well as campus police. We cannot overlook the fact that just this year, campus police, in conjunction with ELN Town Police, stopped Alexis Gray from coming to campus with a knife and firearm. Campus police deserve enormous credit because they saved lives that day. I don't want to flood you with numbers and statistics, but there is one poll that I want to highlight. An organization called Police One conducted a poll of over 15,000 police officers. 96% of those police officers said that a ban on high-capacity magazines will not reduce violent crime rates. Similarly, 70% said a ban on assault rifles would not reduce the violent crime rate. And 20% actually said that a ban on assault weapons would have a negative impact. I encourage you all to look up this poll so that you can read the rest of the report. My point, the discussion about gun violence should not be limited to imposing new gun regulations. Mental illness, the prosecution of criminals, or lack thereof, suicide. In fact, did you know that 59% of all firearm deaths in 2009 were suicides? That's scary. That's really scary. No one's talking about it. I hope that tonight we can address some of the aspects of gun violence that are often overlooked, intentionally and unintentionally, so that we can get closer to finding practical and effective solutions. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Patrick Brown, and I'm a junior at ELN University. First off, I'd like to thank Dr. Arcaro and the ELN community for not only organizing but supporting this event. I decided to participate in this panel to share my thoughts on the role of our modern culture in gun violence. And I believe there are two major ways in which our culture contributes to increasing gun violence. First, many parts of our daily lives, from video games to movies, seem to allow more gun violence into them and to make it acceptable. For example, a movie from, say, the 1950s might show the bad guys getting shot bloodlessly and falling to the ground, while movies today, like Django Unchained, which recently came out, are extremely bloody and very violent. Video games similarly allow gamers to act as first-person shooters and to kill realistic opponents in a very lifelike way. Our senses are increasingly dulled through this to the horror of killing. We don't think about what it really means, and therefore it's not surprising that gun violence is increasing like this. A second issue I see is that guns are become common through video games and movies in our culture. When in a proper setting, when you're firing a gun for the first time, you're taught how to properly handle it and